Okay, this is chapter 4.1 from Animal Diversity, and for this chapter, at the end of this, you should be able to explain and distinguish the concepts of taxonomy, classification, systemization, as well as binomial nomenclature. But we have described a great number of different species, a great number of different genera as well, but even with all of these animals that we have named, it's a pretty small fraction. It's estimated that it's less than 20% of living animals, and it's almost certainly less than 1% of all animals. By which I mean very few extinct animals have been described. There are a number of reasons for that. You know, we've talked in class. Fossilization is pretty hard to take place, and so if you don't have evidence for things, well, you're not going to be able to name them. If you don't see it, you can't name it. Taxonomy is a formal system for naming and classifying species, and systematics is the broader science of comparative biology. So taxonomy is kind of our modern classification, which we're going to talk about, and systematics is this broader umbrella that taxonomy fits underneath. The modern system that we still use to this day was invented by this gentleman named Carol Linné, and he kind of cheekily changed his name to Carolus Linnaeus. He Latinized it. But this is Carol Linné. He was a Swedish botanist and scientist and a really interesting dude. Here's a page from, I think it's Systema Naturae. And you can kind of see, it's in Swedish, but you can see the foundations of what he was working toward in the system that he created himself. And, you know, we're familiar with this scheme. This is all Linnaeus. Domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. This is Linnaeus. His work persists to this day. And before I go on to that, you know, before Linnaeus, our systems were kind of fragmented. They were... If you saw a species and you liked it, you'd say, well, you know, this here dog is Aaron Thompsoni or whatever. It wouldn't even necessarily have been Latin. Probably was Latin still, but somebody on the other side of the hill might be like, no, this dog is Canis lupus. And so there was no consistency. People were overriding each other. And Linnaeus' system... in addition to standardizing things like that, superimposed the hierarchical nature that we have today. We start from the broadest categories and work our way down to the species, which there should only be one name for a species. We'll talk about species later and what that means within the context of zoology specifically. But Carolus Linnaeus' system imposed this hierarchy. It standardized things so that we have the binomial system, so the genus and species name. And it made it so people just didn't have different names for all these animals. And it's still a problem to this day, people kind of overriding each other without being aware. But this fixed a lot of problems within classification, within our naming schemes. We also have this issue of systemization and classification. So classification is kind of you can think of it as the older way, although we still use this name today. When people say classification, they're often talking about systemization or some other system, some other mechanism that fits within it. But the old school classification was things were grouped by their essence. So, you know, a duck is a thing with feathers, and so that is its essence. It ignores evolutionary change. It wouldn't have been able to handle the notion that birds and dinosaurs are very closely related. Or I should say that birds are, in fact, dinosaurs. Systemization, on the other hand, groups things by common ancestry. It tests descendant hypotheses. It does not try to define membership. So what this means is that systemization is concerned with who are your common ancestors. I say I'm related to a chimpanzee, and classification might say, well, we both have similar looking bodies, similar musculature, and so maybe that's why I'm related to an ape. because we have these similar characteristics. Systemization says, I share a common ancestry with an ape, and that's why we're related. It doesn't have to do necessarily with these essences, although you can use an organism's traits to figure out common ancestry. But systemization is what happens when you take classification and you add evolution onto it. So classification, if we're trying to figure out who is a tetrapod, well, ducks have 4 limbs, snakes don't have 4 limbs, snakes can't be a tetrapod. This is classification. Systemization would be, well, who has an ancestor who's a tetrapod? Ah, they both do, so they must be related somewhere along the line. And by the way, this is a simplification. It's not really just as easy as quite this. I'm just trying to show you that classification, just based on essences, just based on these traits. Systematics is based on ancestry. Systematics is classification plus evolution. So moving on to the notion of the binomial nomenclature. We have 2 words for the binomial nomenclature. Bi means 2, nomial means name. So the first word is the genus, and we capitalize the genus whenever we're writing these. If you're writing Homo sapiens here, you will capitalize the genus. The second is the species epithet, which is written in lowercase. Epithet has to do with the specificity of the thing. There is no genus epithet because there are many things within a genus. Species epithet is an epithet because there should only be one organism that has this name to it. I didn't know that. I looked it up, but that's what's happening with epithet. I go like, well, why isn't there a genus epithet? Anyway, the scientific name, if you are printing it, it will be written in italics, or if you handwrite it, you should be underlining it. So Homo sapiens here is in italics. If this was handwritten, it would be underlined. The genus name is a noun. Names of genera must refer to only a single group of organisms. Genera is the plural for genus. Okay, so basically what I'm getting at here is there's this 2-word system. The genus is a noun. We'll talk about the species in a moment, but the genus should only refer to a single group of organisms, and the species only refers to a single organism. So the species epithet is usually an adjective. It is never used alone. In non-scientific discussions, someone might talk about sapiens, but it's not supposed to be used alone, and the reason for that is because it can get confusing. So you have Seta carolinensis, the white-breasted nuthatch, and Pocile carolinensis, which is the Carolina chickadee. If you're just talking about carolinensis, which organism are you speaking about? Ranks above species are single names written with a capital letter. What do I mean by ranks above species? Well, I'm talking about Dear King Philip here. So if you're talking about the kingdom of animals, scientifically, you would write animals and it would be capitalized. Or if you're talking about Iguanidae, which is a family of lizards, which contains the annals, you would just capitalize Iguanidae because this is a rank above species. Okay. So I said that Linnaeus' system helped to sort of deconflict these issues where people were naming species at the same time, or 2 people were naming the same species. So the authority is whoever first describes and names a species. So if you go out and find a gray wolf today and you don't know it already has a name, you can't just rename it. You can try, but when you submit this to the people who know, they'll say, hey, this already has a name, we appreciate your submission. Or maybe they won't say they appreciate your submission. But it's the first person to name it gets to keep the name. I'm sure you could hear my Felis catus in the other room. So the authority's name and date of publication is often used when these things are talked about in papers. So you'll still see Linnaeus because he named a lot of things. So you'll see his name and years in the 1700s pop up quite frequently. The authority citation is not part of the scientific name. It's used bibliographically. If the genus name of a species is changed following its initial description, the authority's name appears in parentheses. These things shift very often, especially in modern times with the advent of genetics and genomics. So species and genera names do change quite often. But the point I'm making here is there's an authority system now, and it's whoever got there first. In the next video, we're going to talk about chapter 4.2.